Okay. Indivisible, liberty and justice for all. And they're all pledging allegiance to me because I'm blocking the flag, you know?
Roll call.
Chris Chaka. Dan Purcell,
Here.
Christina Kaufman,
Here.
Jeremy Sawicki, Kyle Van Fleet, George Mary,
Here.
Okay,
don't have a quorum.
we don't have a quorum, so we're going to make some adjustments. Public comment has changed at the beginning of each meeting. Any member of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes on any township business. During consideration of action items, Pocono residents, elected officials, and defined stakeholders may provide additional comment limited to 1 minute per item. So we don't have any announcements. We have no correspondence. New business. Oh, does anybody have any comments?
I just have one. Can we hold the meeting and have a quorum? That would be my question.
We can't make any motion.
Occurring, but there's a sketch plan that just wants to make a presentation.
Oh, gotcha.
No action.
Got a lady, one second.
Okay.
Microphone.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Beda Babel, and I would like to take this opportunity to, I swear it's not going to take 3 minutes. I know I only have up to 3 minutes, but I'd like to take this opportunity to voice my concerns. They are not on any of the topics on the agenda, today's agenda, but it is something that affects my everyday life, my quality of life, and my property. The concern is a nearby short-term rental. I understand there is a lot of other residents who have suffered because of these. But now I and my husband carry the burden of what seems to us irresponsible decision, lacking basic foresight. The aforementioned rental is practically built in our backyard. While we're being assured by zoning department that all was done up to code, more than minimum distance from the property line, building height within limits, etc., it really doesn't take a specialist to see and predict future issues. The building is very large and it houses 16 plus guests. There is a balcony on the first floor, giving anyone that's there bird view of my entire property, not just backyard, the house, the front, everything. Guests change constantly, as expected, and we never know who is going to be there next. What we do know is that it's going to be noisy. Day, night, weekend, weekdays, you name it. The last 10 days have been particularly daunting, and they resulted in 4 calls to the police department. Hats off to Township Police Department, very professional and courteous. So just something for your consideration. We were advised to come to meeting and voice our concerns. We were advised to, I guess, if noise is excessive around 10 or later, to call a non-emergency number. We were advised to file complaint. We've been doing that, okay, because we've suffered, I want to say suffered really, for the last couple of years. And again, this summer seems to be just particularly bad. So at this point, I just refuse to be a prisoner in my own home. I don't feel like I have to close all the windows and doors just to escape noise. I don't feel safe anymore. Don't know if something can be done about it, but just want to be heard. And if something can be done about better control or maybe even better decisions as to how close to private property do these houses be built? Because again, you know, if you visited the property, we were told the building is 70 feet away from our property line, minimum is 40 feet. It's a commercial zone, okay. But if you ask any of the police officers that came there, one of them told us, well, yeah, their jacuzzi is basically right outside your fence. There's a little fence built by the other previous homeowner. That's the only thing that stands between us and whatever guests happen to come over and over again. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ma'am, what's your address, if you don't mind? Can I just have your address so I know where you are? Yes, yes, if you want to write it right here. Thank you.
Any other?
Sorry, I know it's not my meeting.
Anybody else have any comments? We are going to have a presentation of sketch plans for 520 Post Hill Road subdivision LDP 1455.
I'm Matt, by the way. Nice to meet you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Krishna Japudi with Micro Origin Ventures. We are the equitable owner of 17.3 acre property at 520 Post Hill Road. And we are here for a sketch plan review of a proposed single family subdivision. The existing property is zoned as R1 with 2 acre minimum lot size and 200 feet minimum lot width. No steep slopes and no 100-year floodplain on the property. A wetlands presence absence study was completed. It indicated no wetlands on the property. Exploratory soil probes were performed throughout the site and indicate on-lot septic systems are feasible. 2 existing dwellings are on the property today. Their disposition is still under evaluation and is not part of the sketch plan request yet. Proposed subdivision. This has been revised. We proposed 8 single-family lots, each served by on-lot septic, well, and stormwater management. All lots take access from a proposed private cul-de-sac off Post Hill Road. This revised sketch directly responds to Township Engineer sketch review comments on the lot width, and cul-de-sac frontage, comments 1 and comments 2. And I just gave you the reference to you. That's a revised sketch plan with 7 lots. And how the comments were addressed, they were indicated on that plan. So how the revised plan resolves engineer's comments. Lot width, comment 1. Lots are now configured as frontage lots along the straight street segment. Each meets or exceeds 200 feet minimum. Lots 5, 6, and 7 at 258 feet, 241 feet, 223 feet, respectively. Lots 1, 2, 3 at 302 feet, 211 feet, and 230 feet, respectively. And cul-de-sac frontage, comment 2. Only lot 4 takes frontage on the cul-de-sac bulb itself. It is a larger 3.8 acre lot, so the reduced frontage limitation is no longer a constraint on that. And radial side lines, comment 7. Side lot lines are drawn at right angles to the straight street line, consistent with the ordinance. And lot count, the revision reduces the concept from 8 lots to 7, which we believe is appropriate yield once frontage geometry is honored. And I just have a couple of requests to the commission. I understand this is purely a preliminary sketch review and no decisions or no approvals will be made at this time. But one request was regarding the sidewalk waiver. Would the commission consider a waiver from the sidewalk requirement given the rural low density character of the area? That was comment number 10. This question, could anybody answer or? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, ma'am.
It's been our practice not to give waivers for the sidewalks. Does anybody else want to comment? Amy?
Well, there's actually 2 sidewalk locations. So there would be the requirements for sidewalk on Coastal Road and then any requirements for sidewalk on Coastal Road.
Oh, thank you. So Post Hill Road and then the internal road. And as the chair said, the township has not been waiving that requirement, but you are welcome to discuss that further or possibly a deferral of those improvements, especially the ones on Post Hill Road.
Thank you. And the second one regarding lighting waiver. Would the commission consider a waiver from the street lighting for the same reason? Because it's a low rural density area.
I would say that that would be something that they would have to see a plan to make a determination on.
Thank you. And the last one, offsite improvement timing. Can Post Hill Road half-width improvement and the 50 feet right-of-way dedication be addressed at the preliminary final land development stage, or do we have to address it right now? The question is the time frame of.
You do not need to address anything in sketch plan phase. It's only when you are going for your preliminary or your final plan approval.
Gotcha.
So you don't need to address any of that now.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then we acknowledge all the remaining items of your comments, all the comments. And one last closing question. Are there any other concerns from the commission that would like to address before we move forward with the preliminary plan submission?
What do you have? We don't have any concerns at this time.
Thank you. That's all I have.
And so the sketch plans have been oh, okay. I'm sorry. The sketch plans have been submitted. There are no action items associated with that. We don't have any preliminary plans under consideration. No special exceptions, priority list, unfinished business, new business. Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting? Meeting adjourned.
All our neighbors will be this way.
They're usually close on each other.
Huh?
They're usually close on each other.
Yeah, I know last time, I think I think less than 5 minutes. And just. Short term rent president. I know, it's all president. He's just doing a single family. I'm so family. So it's a. That's. Two family.
Yeah. Right, to the next meeting or 2 minutes? Okay. All right. Ellen, want to take the role, help or?
What do you want me to do?
The work session starts, so
Okay.
we're gonna hand this meeting over to Nancy.
Yes.
Let me get my screen hooked up here.
Yeah, right there.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So tonight's topics on the agenda are, so we're continuing from last month's meeting, discussing the potential zoning or proposed zoning ordinance amendments. So tonight, I'd like to hopefully tie up a couple of loose ends here. So number one on the agenda is discussing the conservation subdivision design option and how that relates to the recreation fee in lieu. And then secondly, discussing the proposed building and impervious cover limits for the commercial districts and the RD district. And then third, to review revisions, the latest revisions that have been made to the solar overlay map, wind overlay map, and the zoning map. So starting out with the conservation subdivision design. I put together this illustration, which I believe is included in your documents for tonight, to explain how the math works on the conservation subdivision design in terms of determining the number of dwelling units that would be permitted if a developer were to choose to do this option. So I just wanted to lay that out there because I think when we talked about it the last time, there was some confusion on how that works. So I thought this might help and everyone can just kind of have that in your back pocket. Now, I did mention that the conservation subdivision design will now be an option. So currently in the draft ordinance, it is written so that it is required, but as we discussed, I will revise that so that conservation subdivision design will be an option. So a developer will have the option of developing their tract as conventional development with the 2-acre minimum lot size as it stands now in your ordinance. They would have the development in certain cases to develop as a PRD, planned residential development. There is, I believe, a minimum tract size that's required in order to be able to do a PRD. And then they would also have the option to develop as a conservation subdivision design. So there will be 3 options available. Now, in terms of, there was a question at the last meeting on how the conservation subdivision design relates to the recreation fee in lieu that's required by the subdivision and land development ordinance. So just looking at this example in the illustration for conservation subdivision design, and I'll try to blow it up so it's on the screen. So let's say we have a tract that is 100 acres total size, and we go through this math where we, according to the conservation design standards, you deduct the area that are in constraints. So if 20 acres are constrained by, say, wetlands and floodplains and steep slopes, then that gets deducted off of that 100 acres. So you're left with 80 acres of adjusted tract area. Now, the density that's permitted in conservation subdivision design is 2 acres per dwelling unit, or 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres. Of that 80 acres of adjusted tract area. So 80 divided by 2 gives you 40 dwelling units. So a developer could build 40 dwelling units on this tract. Before they start building, however, we have to determine how much open space is required to be set aside. So the conservation design option requires that 50% of that adjusted tract area gets set aside as open space. So the adjusted tract area is 80 acres times 50% is 40 acres of open space. And that open space, because it does not, that those 40 acres are unconstrained. That's unconstrained land. So that's like prime open space land, usable open space land. So what you have in this illustration here is your 20 acres of constraints and your 40 acres of adjusted, which is the 50% of the adjusted tract area. So really you're getting 60 acres of open space. Again, 40 of it very usable for recreation and so forth. 20 acres would be your environmental constraints. So now that leaves you with, on this illustration, 40 buildable acres. So you have 20 acres of constraints, 40 acres of additional of usable open space. So that's 60 acres in total. And that leaves you with 40 acres of developable land. If you recall, the density calculation said that the developer could build 40 units. So now you have 40 units on 40 acres. So really the lots are 1 acre or less in order to fit on those 40 acres. And so in terms of recreation fee in lieu, I did a little more math and looked at what your subdivision and land development ordinance requires. So, and let me back up and say the recreational fee in lieu in the SALDO is a mechanism that municipalities use to either get a developer to dedicate parkland to the municipality, or in lieu of that, the developer can pay a fee in lieu of that land at the developer's option. So the municipality is either getting the land or they're getting fee. There are other options. A developer can build improvements for recreational facilities. But in terms of the open space and the fee comparison, so let's say we have.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
On your options there, isn't there another option that the development can deed restrict that open space, but not pass it on to the township?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
very important to me.
Yeah. So in this conservation subdivision design, and I think in your other open space types of developments, there are different ownership options for that open space. So for this 60 acres of open space, it can either be owned by the homeowners association, and in that case, it's only available for use for the residents of that development. It's not open to the public. It can be transferred to the ownership and management of a like a nature. What am I trying to say here? Like a conservancy, land conservancy, or it can be dedicated, or parts of it can be dedicated to the township for public use, or you can have a combination of those types of ownership and management schemes.
Is it? Sorry, just to clarify, so it's not something that can be passed on to like the owners of the property who come in and buy them up once, you know, they're sold off like lawns? That's not what it's meant to be.
No. So
it's not built. It's not, you know, it's not built space.
So the open space is common open space. So that open space, the 40 acres plus the 20 acres, is for use by the residents of the community.
Okay.
I mean, you know, it depends on how, you know, a tract isn't going to be laid out this cleanly. So this is a very generalized example just to make it clear for the sake of illustration of how the math works. But no, typically the open space, that 60 acres, would be common open space.
Okay.
Not owned by the individual owners, but by the homeowners association or whoever the ownership turns out to be.
So this conservation district is only for residential homes, not for any kind of business.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
On a normal subdivision plan, do they have to take out the constrained areas before doing their calculations?
No.
Acres?
On a normal subdivision plan, they would design, and the engineers can correct me if I'm wrong, but on a normal subdivision plan, they would design around those features, floodplain, wetlands, and so
So
forth.
in a normal subdivision plan, on this tract of land, 100 acres, they would have 50 dwelling units potentially buildable versus this one is 40. That's what you and I were talking about last time, and you were telling me there was no difference, and I had to wrap my head.
Yeah,
around it.
so-
That means you're losing 10 houses.
It doesn't, so on a normal subdivision plan, the math doesn't usually work out so cleanly. If you have 2 acres, if you need 2 acres of lot area, it doesn't always work out, and then putting in the roads and so forth, and the different site inefficiencies, we usually deduct from that 100 acres, you would lose some of that acreage to those inefficiencies. And so on a normal quote unquote subdivision plan, you may get more than 40 units. I don't know that you would get 50. You know, I don't think that a developer would get 50. Now, there is an option to account for that. There is an option in the conservation design, which says that if a developer thinks that he or she can get more than, let's say in this case, the 40 dwelling units, they could, in order to just calculate how many units they might get if they did a conventional subdivision, they can do a design of how that would work out. And if they say come out with 45 dwelling units, then they'll get the 45 dwelling units.
But how if they're required to put the constraints to the side before the calculations? So I also think in this specific table, I don't think this is taking into consideration our land here in the Poconos. Our topography, our wetlands, our slopes. 100-acre tract, I don't think you're ever going to get only 20 acres of constrained land. I think you're more in the 30 to 40% of the constrained and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you do a lot of this, but there's not many 100-acre parcels in this area that only have 20 acres of constrained land. I would gauge more of a 30 to 40% of land's constrained. If they're taking that off the top, you're down to 50-60% of the land that you would have to set aside that 30 or 40, and then you're down to 30 dwelling units versus again, on a normal calculation of subdivision, you're still taking into consideration that entire 100 acres and you're building around those constraints. So in this case, we're actually losing developable acres.
I mean, so let's say let's say the math turns out that and again, this is just an example to work out the math, but say you had 40 acres of constrained land, that would leave you with 60 net acres, divided by 30, so now you got 70 acres. And then 30 acres build roads. So now you have 30
dwelling units on 100 acres.
Yeah.
Because you're setting aside all those constraints, where if the regular subdivision plan, you're not setting aside those right off the bat.
Right.
So you still have a calculation potential of 50, and maybe there's a couple plots that you can't build 100% on, take out 5 or 10, you're still getting 40. So any way that you look at this plan, you're taking away buildable acres.
So, and I'm not arguing with you, I'm just trying to think this through, is that if you have severely constrained land on a development tract and you have a 2-acre lot, I don't think the developer is going to have to make some lots larger in order to make space for the houses and yards and so forth. Like they don't want the entire yard to be wetland or steep slopes, like house and steep slopes. So some of those lots are and maybe many of those lots are going to have to be larger than 2 acres.
I just think,
and then when you put
taking the decision away from the person developing the land.
But they have the option.
They have the option.
This is just an option.
Is this or PRD?
Or conventional.
Oh,
Or conventional.
So they still could do they can do their normal subdivision
Yeah.
through the township.
Yeah, we're going to make it optional. So
Okay.
they could still do the normal subdivision. And even if they do this, again, this conservation subdivision, if they think, let's say in this case, if they say, you know what, I can get more than 40 dwelling units, I'm going to draw up a plan, like a conventional subdivision plan to show you, like I can get 45. then okay, you can have your 45. We're not trying to take anything from you. You can have your 45 units.
So how would
You
they
might
take
have
all
to
of this?
adjust because they're still going to have to set aside the open space.
John wanted to say something too.
There is a situation where this might be useful in our area. We would have 100 acre tract and one corner of it is really nice, level, right off the road. And the rest of it is really constrained. You might not be able to work in that great area just because it's too steep, too wet, can't get to it. And so this option would allow you to cluster your houses on that nice piece of ground on smaller lots. So under that scenario, it might work to the developer's advantage. You might only be able to get 5 houses if it's really a constrained tract, whereas with this example, he might be able to get 10 on a smaller lot size. So I do think a lot of my experience has been it doesn't work. It's just more advantageous to the developer to sell a bigger house on a bigger lot. And that's what he's going to do if he has that option. But there may be some times when this might work. And that's why I think maybe offering it as an option, let the developer choose. I mean, it's capitalism. Let him decide what works best for him. And he's got a better choice than just saying you have to do it this way or that way.
Okay. No, and I'm fine with that. So I no desire to work in constrained areas or anything. And I was under the impression that it was going to be this or PRD. And the normal subdivision was kind of going away. So that's
Yeah.
why,
Right now,
that's why I want to make sure there was.
right
voice.
now, the way the draft is written is that this is required, but
Well,
I
that's-
will
so that's what I
revise it.
saw.
I will
Okay.
revise it so that, because we talked about it last month, I think, of making it optional and the PRD would be optional and conventional. So they'll have 3 choices.
Okay. Like I said, that was my concern, was it was required.
Yeah,
For the
no,
last
we're good,
meeting.
we're good. Okay, so, so the recreation fee and lieu, yes. Oh, sorry.
So somebody's developing the property, and they have open space, and they decide to do that. Can they put the open space in between the homes so that the lots are bigger, even though they haven't necessarily owned?
Yes. Yeah,
That in essence.
and that's more desirable, and there are design guidelines in the conservation subdivision part of the ordinance that says, we would, like you to put some of this common area in among the homes so that it makes the development look a lot nicer and people may have green space right outside their doorstep instead of you live over here and you have to trek over here to use the open space. And there's open space around the perimeter of the development so that it screens the development from the roads. There may be, walking trails that go through it for the community. So that open space, there may be a big chunk of it somewhere, but a certain percentage of that acreage is dispersed among the neighborhood. Yeah.
Real quick, just to follow up on John's point though, the benefit to the developer is John's scenario is that the amount of structure for roads is reduced dramatically.
Right.
So you can preserve, so in that case, it's really fine. It's not going to be dispersed. Again, John's example, 70% steep slopes, wetlands, 30% is developable. So in that 30%, you're going to have smaller lots with a shorter road distance.
Mhm.
They use the developer a lot of money,
Right.
which is going to incentivize the developer to go that route versus trying to build a longer road and navigate all those constrained.
Right.
acres, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And some developers will tell you they prefer this because it's less site operation work, it's less infrastructure. Right, right. Yeah.
So would I be correct in saying if you did this conservation district, there is no in lieu of fees because you're required to set the side of land, so there's no option?
So we'd have to write it in here that if they do conservation subdivision design, they're exempt from the
Yeah.
recreation fee in lieu. So, I mean, it's the township's choice. You can either, on top of them setting aside this open space, you can still require them to do the fee. Or you can say, you know what, you've already given this open space, you're exempt.
For me, saving green space, no matter whether it's owned by a private person or us, I'd just like it to stay green. And rather than the green money, I would rather see the green area, but that's me.
So I agree with you 100%. Ellen. The only issue that I have is I think we have to make a decision across the board with the fee in lieu of, because we have in the past fought the battle with developers that even though they have X amount of space that they say is open space and can it be used by the public potentially, but you're crossing private property to get into that. So that would be my only concern with this, is making sure it's structured properly.
Yeah.
That if we're going to waive these fees, the constrained area open space set aside has to be easily accessible by the public from public roads. That I just don't want to go down, like open up Pandora's box when we're looking at this compared to the other ones and then having that issue. But I agree with you, open space 100%, but then we need to be careful on how we word it.
So in this presentation, that means that the lot size that you're proposing is less than 0.7 acre. Or is there going to be a minimal cutoff for the lot size being 0.46 acre?
The minimum lot size is 30,000 square feet. So a little bit less than an acre. Yeah. Right.
So I think that's okay with you guys to have that small lot size, meaning that density that's right to the area.
I think the entire development though, even though the houses are in small lots, the development has to be the 100 acres. So,
right.
And it stays that way for forevermore.
No, it would be the same. It would be the same amount of people, or possibly even less. If it's a 100 acres, so as Commissioner Leap was saying, if it's a 100-acre property, right now, the township's ordinance is 2 acres per dwelling unit. So that would be 50 dwelling units, possibly somewhere between 40 and 50 dwelling units. Right now, conventional subdivision, the way it is in the township now. So let's say they would get 45 dwelling units. Under this conservation design, they would get 40 dwelling units. So in fact, fewer people. It's just on a smaller piece.
So I see what he's saying though. So our ordinance is 2 acre minimum for buildable. And the way these calculations are all reading is saying 40 acres buildable, minimum lot size 30,000 square feet, which is 0.7 acres. So if we're going to allow them to build up 0.7 acres, are we going to get a higher density?
No, it's 40.
So it's still reliant on
the 40
2 acre per household.
Yeah.
We just will allow smaller lot sizes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Could you write that in the ordinance though, where still take the 40 acres, which is technically usable, and automatically make the builder put it in between the homes? This way the homes are actually spread out over the complete 80 acre or whatever that be, 80 acres that are the 40 and 40, so 80 acres. So the 40 acres that you can take out, a half of the acre, that would be in and amongst the home, and basically write that in the ordinance, rather than being able to put a big chunk here and then 0.7, 0.7, 0.7 like that. You might go something like that in the ordinance.
So it really depends on the site itself. I mean, all of the 20 acre in this example, the 20 acres of constraints may not be on one end of the track. They're gonna, if it's slopes, wetlands. So the houses are going to be in and among that. They're not going to be.
You could have a wetland in the corner right in the middle.
Right.
But I'm just saying, for the majority of the homes, right in the ordinance, that the homes have to be, space as maximally as possible. That's what
I would just note that, some of the most charming communities in the Poconos are like a bunch of quarter-acre lots. It's still a lot of property. I mean, we have an acre, and it's a lot. And having smaller property sizes means that younger families can afford the homes because you're not paying as much in property taxes. So I don't think we should go too crazy trying to to limit the lot sizes, because that's what makes homes affordable often. As long as we're getting single-family homes rather than apartments and stuff like that. I prefer the latter or the former to the latter.
Something system. I'm just thinking of trying to spread the home to house rather than, have this guy's on 0.7, this guy's on 0.7, right in a row. Instead of, this guy's on 0.7, but he's got another acre around him. Same thing here. This way there's maybe 200 feet between homes rather than, 75.
Yeah.
Kind of where I'm going with that.
Nancy, do we have another meeting after this about this, or is this tonight the end of this?
I was thinking tonight would be the end of it, and I will make the revisions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I honestly think that I think I am, and I know Frank is, I think it's a hard time to picture this because there's not a lot of 100-acre parcels in this area that 80% are buildable. So having an idea of a more realistic plot of land here in the Poconos, 30, 40 acres, and then taking out our subtractions and our constraints and everything, which leaves 10 out of the 40 buildable. I think it'd be a little bit easier to understand than a 100-acre tract, because there's not really any in this area that you're not going to bulldoze every single tree on the lot, literally.
I mean, so you could do the math on like a 30 acre, or are you saying you want to see like an example of a Pocono property that has constraints on it and how that might look?
I mean, if we're having another meeting, yes. If not, I'll rest my case. I'm fine. I just think it would be easier for us to understand and the public to understand if it was a more realistic lot here in the Poconos.
Could we compare it to the PRD that's going in and say, what if this was a conservation district instead of a PRD, and see how that would work in comparison to what we already have the plans, right? For the ridge. And that might be
a lot of steep slope, a lot of constraints on that land in particular. I'm just saying a plot like that is going to be a lot more normal in our area than down in the Lehigh Valley, Wind Gap area, where they just have fields of flat space. We've got steep slope, we have wetlands, we have a lot of factors here that we don't have 100 acres of land and getting 80 of that buildable. We just don't. We don't have it here.
So try to picture like a 30-acre tract in the Poconos, and you may have steep slope running through that tract. And you might have, a creek running through, and so you might have some wetlands at different spots throughout that tract. Well, no, so you're simply just deducting that acreage, and then on the buildable parts of
setbacks and everything is
on the
buffer zones, aren't they all part of your constrained area?
No, it's just the environmental constraints.
So the stream
gets taken out.
The buffer zones are constrained in this model, because you think that they'd have to be.
It lists in the so if you have regardless, what I'm trying to say is, like, think of a tract. This is not a natural, unless it's a farm, which I know you don't have here. This is not a natural looking parcel, but imagine this is 30 acres. There's a stream running through part of it. You take out your buffers, there might be some wetland, you take out your wetland, and maybe there's a slope area, you take that out. Just subtracting it math wise. Now it's up to the developer to then develop the houses around that land. So you're not going to, I would say in most cases here in the Poconos, you're not going to have all of your houses on one spot. They might be in and around, wherever the developer can fit them on their 30,000 square foot lots in and around the constraints, and they're gonna lay out the open space
And I
where
think
it
it's a
can
great
be.
idea. I just don't want to make parcels undevelopable either. You know what I'm saying? John, go ahead.
I think don't lose sight of the fact that this is one of three options. And the PRD accomplishes what I think you're trying to force into this option and what Frank's trying to force into this option. With the PRD and the one that was recently done, which is about to go under construction, the Ridge, they worked around all of these steep slopes and other environmentally sensitive areas because, in my opinion, the PRD was the best way to develop that piece of ground. And it is going to have, matter of fact, the lots are non-existent. You buy your house, everything else around it is open space. So it appears like you're going to have a lot of ground because of the way it's laid out, but you really don't. So if you're trying to force the open space into the conservation subdivision, sometimes it may work, but sometimes you're trying to force it and it really doesn't work very well. So, right. So that's why you have to leave it up to the developer. And each piece of ground is individual, and each piece of ground can be developed in a couple different ways. So it's almost impossible to write an ordinance to dictate how that piece of ground, even if you knew what it was ahead of time, should be developed. You can really only give the guidelines, and then it's up to the developer to make the determination is what's the market want this year. Maybe it's smaller lots. 10 years ago, it was big lots. You've got to have some flexibility in there. And I think this is the best way of giving it the flexibility that it needs.
No, I'm fine with that. If we're trying to incentivize this to push open space and smaller building lots for, less impervious coverage and stuff, I just want to make sure that we're writing it in a way that a developer actually can use it versus super restrictive that we're doing all this and not a single piece of land in this township will ever fall within this.
I think that you would have
Not really
land
against it.
that
I'm
will-
fighting to try and make sure it works.
I think it would have worked had he wanted to do it. I think the Cranberry Estates could have worked
Okay.
because it was largely flat. There was floodplain there. That would be your restrained land. But you didn't have the steep slopes, but you did have the floodplain to deal with. I think we have some other areas in the township where it's possible.
Possible. Okay.
All right.
How permanent is this conservation lots? Could we have a scenario where a different planning commission 10, 20, 30 years down the road say, oh, we want to take these 40 acres that were set aside and develop them? Is that a possibility?
No, because they would be restricted from future development.
So it's forever.
Right. Right.
Restriction be removed by the original developer.
So I believe in the ordinance that it can either, I think, I'm trying to recall what it says exactly in the ordinance, but I believe that they need to be put under conservation easement. There may be an option for it to be deed restricted, but I think that is kind of discouraged because that's not as strong of a protection. And I'd have to double check to see if the deed restriction is even in there, or if it's saying that it has to be conserved in perpetuity under a conservation easement. Okay, ready to move on to the next topic? Any other questions? All righty. So next topic are the impervious cover limits, proposed impervious cover limits and building coverage limits in the RD C1, C2, C3 districts.
I'm sorry, I I thought the next one would be in lieu of fees because we didn't really address that.
I
Right.
thought that, do you want to waive them then for conservation design? You wanted to waive, so if a developer chooses to do conservation subdivision design, then they would be exempt from having to pay the recreation fee in lieu.
But I thought we were gonna revisit in lieu of across the board for any development.
Not
'Cause-
at this
'cause
time.
we-
I think that'll be part of the saldo.
It's not in our ordinances. Okay.
It's in the
Uh,
saldo.
Is that one of the
which we're-
conflicting things, Jen?
We're not addressing the saldo tonight. We're addressing the zoning.
Okay.
But
Thank
the
you.
question that came up last month was, how does the fee in lieu, how does the conservation subdivision design and the fee in lieu work together? And so the options again for the township would be, if a developer chooses to do the conservation subdivision design, do you want to then, and they're setting aside 50% open space, does the township want to then also require them to do the recreational fee in lieu? And what I'm hearing is that you do not want to require them to do that as well, in the case of conservation subdivision design.
I thought Leo and John were working on in lieu of fees, so I'm not sure.
The developer, as our saldo requires, must dedicate public open space. You start with that premise. With the agreement of the developer, you can enter and have in lieu of fees, privately restricted public, air quotes, space, or they want to put in a community pool, so we'll pay for the pool. But that's with the agreement of the developer. In this situation, as it relates to the conservation district, they're agreeing to put, we'll use Nancy's example, 40 acres as conserved property. You wouldn't be able to say, oh, by the way, on top of that, you better pay in lieu of fees. No, it's an or. It's not an and. So the in lieu of fees go away regardless. The question is, and it doesn't work in the conservation because they get the benefit of the density, maintaining the density. It's not like that person can come in and say, I want the density and I want to pay in lieu of fees here. It would defeat the whole purpose. The conservation district is not set up to be that way. In order to get the benefits associated with it, you're dedicating property, homeowner association, township, whoever, you're dedicating property, and there is no right to charge additional in lieu of fees. So the in lieu of fees go away. Why would I do it?
So the rest of it in lieu of is saldo that we'll discuss at some other time.
Yes, we had a very productive conversation tonight. We saw it on the agenda, anticipated that it may morph into something larger. But yes, but as it relates to our issue this evening, no, you couldn't require in lieu of fees in addition to 40 acres out of 100 of dedicated property.
Thank you. Sorry, Nancy. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Okay, so next topic is the impervious cover and building coverage limits. So we saw this table last month, and the question came up as to what the impact would be if the township were to go ahead and reduce the impervious cover limits as is proposed in the draft ordinance. So in the draft ordinance, in the C1 district, the impervious cover is proposed to be reduced from an 80% maximum to 60% maximum impervious cover. In the C2 district, reduce the impervious from 80% to 65%. And in the C3 district, the ordinance proposes to reduce the impervious cover from 80% to 65%. So I did some mapping analysis, and based on whatever available data there is on what the impervious cover is in the township now. And actually the data is a bit older. So these numbers are approximations. It looks like in the entirety of the C1, C2, and C3 districts, as of now, with an 80% maximum impervious cover limit in your C district, there are approximately 44 parcels that currently exceed that limit. Now, if the impervious cover is reduced in the C1, C2, and C3 districts, there would be an additional approximately 42 parcels would exceed those limits, the 60%, the 65%.
In addition to the 44.
In addition to, yeah, so you already have 44 that are exceeding 80%. If you reduce the impervious cover to 60% in the C1, 65% in C2 and C3, you're going to have 42 parcels now, an additional 42 parcels now exceeding the impervious cover limits.
And what was the population of parcels? Do you have the total parcel number?
Total parcel numbers in those areas? Yeah. So I calculated that so let me go on to say though, of those 42 parcels, 10 of them are townhomes and 2 of them are twins in some of your residential developments. So I think the concern was more for like commercial properties that would be impacted.
What are twins?
Twins are houses side by side.
Duplex.
So they
Oh,
look like,
duplex.
yeah, like a duplex or a twin. So 42 parcels, but 12 of them are residential townhomes and twins. So I'm not sure, the implications of that impact. If those townhomes or twins wanted to expand, or like they would now be non-conforming in terms of impervious, but I don't know that there's much consequence there.
So non-conforming, Leo or John, 50% they could increase?
Oh, right. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So of those 4, yeah, you're right. Yeah. So really you have then, if you do 42 minus the 10 townhomes and the 2 twins, you have 30 parcels that would exceed the 60 to 65%, because the residential is 35%. Right. Good catch.
I have a question. Why did we decide to go for a scale where the more intensive the commercial application, the less impervious surface they get? Doesn't that just spread out the really bad stuff? Wouldn't you want to like have it be more impervious surface for like a C3 thing, so you can put, I don't know, like all the really, again, like the warehouses and stuff in a relatively small area, rather than requiring them to only take up so much of the lot, so they just they spread out through the township?
Let's see. So the C1 district has proposed 60% impervious. So in the C1 district, the idea there was the C1 district also has a 40% maximum building coverage. So in the C1 district, the idea was and that's like the outer reaches of this C district, was to reduce the scale of the development so it's more smaller buildings, less impervious. And then as you get into the C2 and C3 districts, the impervious is 65%. So a little more than the C1, 5% more than the C1 district. Yeah, I mean, you could. And that's a question here for tonight is, do you want to go with those lower impervious coverages, or do we need to adjust them or keep them at 80%. But I could see in this, like in
I just think-
C2, C3 district,
Yeah, I mean,
you
I just
might
think.
want to
oh,
go
sorry.
higher to allow for those larger, the uses that tend to be larger.
Yeah, I just think like the RD, parts of the community, those ones, a lot of them are more rural. And having the impervious so high there, you think you want to bring that down. I mean, I would think bringing it down might be nice, just to again make sure that it's less intensive stuff in those areas, like out by the Cranberry Bog and stuff. I think that's all RD out there still. That's undeveloped. Having so much impervious surface, like imagine if all of what is that, Birchwood is 70% paved over.
So there's the zoning map. The RD are the light purple areas. So let's hold that thought. So when we go, so back to the math, so the 30 parcels that would now exceed the 60 and 65% impervious cover, that is 3.5% of the properties in the commercial districts.
What about the height? What about the height reduction from 50 to 35?
The height reduction from 50 to 35,
Because that was one of the things
that was in the C1 district. That I don't know how the math works out because I don't have data on which. Paul, you have anything?
So I looked into that. Obviously, I couldn't go out and tape measure each building, but based on kind of uses and permits in the recent years, I only have about like 8 throughout the whole commercial district that were over 35. Most of them would be under 35 feet. So it's not too restrictive on that end. But I think impervious coverage would probably be the further limits that we may want to take a look at more.
I understand what Charles was saying, but I'm thinking, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking you're going to have different industries. So we were trying to scale them down and not have so much impervious surface. So I'm not sure that's going to work as far as you're going to have less people because you got a solar field, you got a warehouse, you got a data center. They're coming either way. So are you going to give them all 80%? Or are you going to give them all 65? We're not going to have 2 warehouses because we only gave them 65. I don't think, unless that's what you're saying.
No, I'm saying like for an RD zone, 70% seems really high compared to, the C3 is only 5% lower. RD is like all around Pocono Manor. RD is out by Birchwood. Those are the property. Those are big, RD properties in the township that might be developed in the near future. Do we want to see them 70% paved over? The solar field was bad enough up there by Pocono Manor. Imagine if that was pavement. So, I think bringing that down in RD might help to scale down those industries, whereas allowing for denser development, like if we allow more impervious surface coverage for like a C3 application, that means we can constrain them to, a smaller area because we can get a bunch of lots and say, these are all C3, you can build them super compact, but then we put all that industry here and we help to consolidate it. Because if we have like, you have to set aside, 40% of the property or something, you get, again, you start to sprawl these things out because if you only zone one lot, it becomes spot zoning. But if you zone a bunch of lots and they can build them closer together and put all that stuff there, it helps to avoid that spot zoning challenge and helps to let that development just be more condensed.
So on the map, I have the zoning map displayed on the screens. So there is the C3 district. And I recall that some of the discussion had to do with the fact that every stream in Pocono Township is either exceptional value or high quality. And thus the reduction to 65%. And the C3 district, you have some tributaries. These are direct tributaries to Pocono Creek. And so I think in the C3 district, that was one of the reasons why we put the impervious down to 65 instead of, typically, yes, for a more intense district, the impervious cover would be a bit higher. But given the environmental features here, I think the Planning Commission wanted to really, limit the impervious.
Is this, 715? Where is?
That's 715. The red line going through is 715. Oops, sorry about that.
This is where Core 5 and North.
And this is 80 and this is 611. So this is 715 and the 80 interchange. Core 5, I think, is this parcel.
Old Dominion's over there. So it's the college, I think.
Right. And the college is up here, I believe.
I think it's the parcel just south.
This
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Are we required to have C3 if we branch out from just a C district? Like, are we, because we just have a C now, are we required to have C1, 2, 3?
Well,
No, you're not required.
the reason that they broke it up into those though is to allow for certain things that, like, you have to allow for
like the
everything.
things at C3.
You have to allow for everything legally. So that we're not caught with our pants down and have somebody come in and present a plan. And if we don't allow for it, that means they're allowed to put it there. So it's a protection.
So a major exercise that the Planning Commission did was to go through every use and assign each use to either C1, C2, and then we had a C3 as buckets of different types of uses.
Well, in that C3 zone, I think we started talking about this last time, but like Ruby Lane and Kevin's Way is in there, and I don't want them to be C3. So
I think it looks like they got carved out in this latest draft though, and I was actually looking at that. I think Kevin's Lane got taken and moved to C1.
Yeah, Kevin's Lane is now C1. We did talk about doing that.
Okay, couldn't see that.
So there's Kevin's Lane right here, this arm of C1. That's Kevin's Lane.
And Ruby Lane is also a C1.
Ruby Lane is C1,
Okay.
right here.
So they're not in C3.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Would anyone consider changing that area to R2 instead? We already have the trailer park there. If we get it out of commercial, there isn't really anything commercial on that stretch. At least as far as there's obviously all the disturbance from the outflow from the Core 5 site. But other than that, it's a really quiet area. Moving it to R2 might help to, keep it quiet and make sure that the trailer park there stays compliant.
I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but
Yeah,
Residential is allowed in C1.
residential is allowed. In C1 and C2.
Yeah.
my concern there would be what happens with the kennel.
Well, I think they would be non-conforming either way because that would have to be in C3 and this is C1 right now, so they're non-conforming regardless.
They would have to be in C3. The kennels are C3.
I believe so.
It's crazy that there's a kennel there. So Leah, on the kennel thing though, if we change the zoning, this was a special exception, and if the kennel closes, does that go away or only, and does it change based on what they're zoned?
If it's sold as a kennel, it can remain a kennel. If they stop using it as a kennel, then they have to comply with current zoning. Whatever the current zoning is.
I'm fine with that.
So because they are residential, and I know we've changed another residential or a commercial neighborhood that was just residential to residential, why can't we do that with these parcels? That's solely really residential, as was the other one that got changed.
Are you talking about all of the C1 that were shown here, plus the little Kevin's or Ruby Lane arm?
That's residential, whatever part that may be.
I think everything to the left of Route 80 there, that's a whole residential area there.
This C1.
Yeah, that whole block is C1 there.
I mean, if the whole block is C1, I wouldn't do just the little arm
No, I would do the whole thing.
that was carved out because I think you have a spot zone if you do that.
Well,
But
have
if you
Creeper
do-
Shed in there, I think. In
But-
C1.
Well, if you do
No,
all
Graves
of,
is along 611, not 80.
Somebody owns that, plans down the road. Commercial.
I thought it was like,
Isn't that?
where's Staten?
Staten Road.
Staten Road is right
In C-
across in the C2,
Between the two
right here.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that block there includes Ruby Lane, includes Pole Ball, includes Kevin's Lane. It's that whole area.
Yeah, then I'm okay with that too.
Staten Road go across
Yeah,
to
because
here.
Staten goes to Ruby Lane.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this
that's
is
it right there.
Staten.
Oh, so-
C1, so close to Heather's Village and everything sits up there.
What's already in commercial? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I am commercial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Because it's commercial right now, and they have there's a trailer park in there, correct?
Yeah.
They're all on a one septic, be correct, they're not on a public utility.
I think they're running the sewer there now, so it's going to be there imminently. And R2 does, I believe R2 in our current ordinance does allow trailer parks. I don't know if it does in the new ordinance. I assume it does. I don't think that would have changed. So yeah, they should stay conforming. They could stay there without having to, make any major changes.
I mean, I'm all about residential areas, but I mean, if I were a property owner, can you make these decisions without consulting everybody? Understand? Because if I had a commercial property, I always equate that with being more valuable than
That's what I was
residential, having more options.
Yeah.
I'd get pretty ticked off if you change that to residential. Because it would deprive me of certain investments. I mean, I'm just.
Everybody gets notice though. Everybody would get a notice. Yeah, right? Leo, that's a notice in a public hearing and yeah.
So
this
that
ordinance
was a
ran a lot
point that I
math.
was going to bring up as well.
Uh-huh.
Is people who purchase their properties in a C1 zoning district
Mhm.
bought it with the intent of commercial. Now, unfortunately, the downside of that is those people are getting bulldozed by the commercial businesses coming in like Core 5 and everything. However, not that it makes it any better now, but the fact that that commercial corridor is being developed, it also increases the value of those property owners' properties because they're C1 or C3. And should they want to sell their single family houses because they're being overrun, it does increase their property value. So it's really a catch-22. And I think that that's a really big decision that the homeowners in those sections need to make.
So maybe we should send a letter. Yeah.
Okay, so leave it as is for now. C1, or are we?
I'd like to see R2. I think it would. Again, I really think all the homeowners will be notified. We're already dividing up the township. We had someone in here at the last meeting who was frustrated that we had chosen C1 for something that's currently C. So they already feel like they're having what they could do there rolled back. I don't know that we'd ever see anything. C currently allows like multifamily and stuff like that. So I don't see that we'd see anything in R2
in that area that we wouldn't see and see already, except for, again, like the really, really, the really heavily commercial stuff. The stuff that creates a lot of traffic and noise.
You're gonna change them from C to.
They're in the orange, right, the other side of 80.
Staten Road's on this side, Ruby Lane's on this side.
You're looking at 80,
Right.
you're thinking it's 611.
No.
Yeah, 611, it's still all commercial, that's 611. So yeah.
There.
Yeah, no, Kramer Sheds, all that stuff would all stay commercial.
Ruby Down there.
It's just once you go onto
So
the
all
bridge
that
under
stuff
80.
would stay on
Yeah.
top.
Yeah.
So the only properties over there would be Polville Court, the few houses. Yes, the few, I think there's 2 or 3 houses that you access through Polville Court. That's owned by a church currently. They were potentially looking to do that, but they were told they need land development to start a church there. So they're single family dwelling.
Too, though, isn't it? That-
Yes. Ruby Lane doesn't actually connect to those properties, but yeah.
Yeah.
Ruby Lane, which I'm pretty sure we're all aware they are very not for commercial district. And then Kevin's Lane, obviously, as well.
I know there are a fair number of people in Jackson Township that don't like that we're got a commercial district jammed right up against the edge of their township either.
So what's the big parcel right where the C1 sit, on that map says? What is that?
I think that's the drainage for Core 5, isn't it? Doesn't it go like under and over to there too? I think that's also owned by Core 5. So am I
Don't
correct?
believe.
Am I wrong?
I don't believe so. It's a undeveloped lot currently.
Oh no, that's the one.
They're
that's owned
clearing
by
those trees,
Energy
right?
What's the
Company.
what's the
Yeah.
parcel or the property?
It does not have an address. It is 12.93777. It's approximately. It's owned by Sixth Street Partners Incorporated. So they may, I don't know if they're it's not coming up as potential land development right now on Treasure,
So
so.
why don't we be a good neighbor, send these people a letter and asking them what they want?
94.
Well,
I know.
that's what we'll do when the ordinance goes out, isn't it?
Yeah, but why
Do
bother?
we want to
If-
send it twice?
If nobody wants it, then we don't need an ordinance, right? We can leave it as is, but if they want it, then I would put forth the ordinance, yeah. I mean, I think people are gonna want it, but.
That big parks on C1 or that to bottom of or even C2. Other across the street.
C1 is more restrictive, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
or at least it's restrictive, so that's more residential anyway.
But I don't know that you'd want to leave
But you
one
can't leave it.
parcel here
They're
as
asking
C1.
for to stop them.
Yep.
If somebody purchased it.
In order
towards
to,
mine,
yeah,
but I do agree with you guys. If now that I see that those have had their village and everything's protected up higher. It's all the residential neighborhoods everywhere.
Right, once you cross the bridge, it's, yeah, yeah.
Putting it to an R2, if people want it.
R2 would also give them the ability to do like multifamily, 2-family, some more increased density residential that may allow them to capitalize on that property without fully diminishing the commercial value.
That's allowed in C1 already, though, isn't it?
Yes.
That's allowed in C1 too. Yeah.
Yeah, under R2, they have it from longer.
Exactly. Yeah. It would. It would be an apartment building across the street, not a Walmart on that lot.
I've had multiple people in that area approach me and ask if they could be moved to residential. I think this is, I think they've spoken to other commissioners as well. That's kind of how that little, strip, Kevin's Lane, how this all got started. So I think R2 would definitely be popular amongst the residents there, and I support it. But yeah, if we want to send a letter beforehand, if you want to do that, I'm not opposed to it. So just as a kind of heads up, the one large lot that Chrisanne was talking about, the only access they have is off of down Staten towards Garden Road more, which would be Jackson Township. So you may have kind of them, if they ever wanted to do a subdivision, or land development, they may have comments and concerns as well. So that might be a concern. I don't know exactly where that line falls.
You're saying?
So the property's in Pocono, but the access would be Jackson. So depending on what use someone would want to develop that, there may be certain restrictions based on road access requirement under Saldo. So it's not like you're totally destroying their property value, but it is something to consider. Again, I don't think sending a letter would hurt. I think a majority of the owners would be in favor of it, but
So if you're talking about the people that are south on that, like on the bottom,
The big parcel, that C1, that where the C1 sits, it would basically end up being same situation as we just went through with Hamilton for the dual brand hotel. Because access to the hotel is in Pocono. The parcel is a Pocono Township parcel, but half where they're putting the building is a Hamilton Township parcel. So that encompassed three different townships: Stroud, Hamilton, and Pocono.
Yep.
So it had to go through us and Hamilton because of their access into the property. But the building is in Hamilton.
so that
We lost the taxes and yes,
right? So if they built in Pocono, that's up to us.
if they put the building there, but if. Yeah,
If
so.
you look at
that.
the map up there, that dark gray line is the Pocono line. There's a small property that has a single family dwelling just under the sea there. They actually access on the road off like Scipio Way, Gardner. So approximately half of the large parcel is in Jackson Township. It kind of follows that road. It's not really shown well on that, but our jurisdiction would be approximately half. So it'd be very similar to the dual
And
brand
maybe
hotel.
that parcel would remain commercial if they don't want it, right?
I don't know how they have it zoned over there in Jackson.
So we would have the authority to zone it. Obviously, you wouldn't want to leave just one parcel C1. You may have to kind of combine that with the darker red, which is C3.
Oh,
Excuse me, C2.
I don't know if we want to put like a big shopping center back there. Again, it's like residential. That's what we're trying to spare these people from.
well, let's send a letter and see what we get back. How does everybody feel then? R2? Or send a letter first?
I say just do R2.
Send a letter.
They'll hear about it.
Your taxpayers, where you're representing them, you send them a letter.
Yeah, I think that we ability to send a letter to see what people have to say so they have a voice. Whether we, pass it or not, I think they deserve an opinion. The property owners that pay taxes.
We're already changing everybody's zoning, but sure, send a letter. Why not?
But we sent letters kind of go from Gary, Charles.
No, you mean this whole C123 thing we haven't, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
I think they should be in big rush to get it changed. Send the letters out.
You could change it anytime, basically, right?
Okay. All right, so we got a little sidetracked there because we were talking about impervious cover and then we got onto the zoning map, which we will come back to the zoning map. But if we can maybe come to some consensus on what to do about impervious cover. So for the RD, C1, C2, C3, do you want to go ahead with, let's say for the C1, C2, C3, do you want to go ahead with reducing the impervious cover in C1 to 60%, C2 65%, and C3 65%? Based on what we
I think you were going to tell us how many parcels were in the population when you counted out that 44 and 42. What was the total population?
The total number of parcels in the whole C1, C2, C3, I have that somewhere. 830 parcels And so, as I said, if you do reduce those impervious coverages, taking out the residential properties that were affected, you would have 30 parcels, 30 additional parcels that would be now over the impervious cover limit, which is 3.6% of all of the.
But you said we had 44 plus that, right?
44 are currently already over the 80%.
Right.
Another 30 would be over the 60 and 65%.
So it's about 10%.
Those 30 parcels is like 3.6% parcels are now like newly over the limit.
It's not too bad.
Question. What do you know what the current standpoint of all those properties, like, are they hovering around 50%, 60%, 45%? What
It
are,
varies. I mean, it ranges all the way.
but I mean, you know how many are over. I was just wondering if there was a median number where they currently
I
sit.
did not record that, but I know that the percentages of impervious cover for the parcels that are developed they range from all the way. Yeah. But sorry, I did not take a look at the average or median.
I'd like to see RD come down to 60% coverage. I feel like, again, that's like upstream from the cranberry bog on the side of the mountain. I think 70% impervious coverage, that's just going to lead to stormwater issues like you see up by the solar field now.
Are the rest of you in favor of that? Reducing RD from 70% to 60%?
Do we know what is it now? Oh, you said
RD is currently RD is currently 80%. The draft ordinance proposes a reduction to 70%, and Commissioner Kepler is requesting further reduction to 60% for the RD.
So what do we know how much are RD now? Because we have some in development in process in RD. Do we know what their impervious coverage is? Because we're going to put them right out before they even. Yeah, but it doesn't mean they're doing 80%. Yeah.
That's what it's now.
Yeah.
I agree with Charles here, but let my logic down here. We're protecting commercial property more than recreational, right?
That's what it looks like to me. Yeah, that's what caught my eye.
It's recreation. Shouldn't we be protecting those properties more or equal to commercial? Right?
The issue that is going to be had between RD and the C1, 2, and 3 zoning districts is a lot of the C districts have access to public utilities like water and sewer, where the RD district is going to be more rural. They are not going to have access to a lot of those systems. So I think that's why the impervious coverage is a little bit higher, and they're going to have a lot more constraints on their land than a typical C1, 2, or 3 property. Typically, not always. But I think that's why there's that difference.
And then we get in lieu of fees for new development and RD. Right. Or open space, which is even better. So that is not impervious surface. That cuts down on the impervious, I assume. But
And I did look at the current impervious in the RD. Currently, again, these are approximations, these numbers. 42 are currently over the 80% limit. If it were reduced to 70%, only 3 additional parcels And actually, that's not even true because those are townhomes and twins. So it really would not impact.
Are you talking about the townhomes on Munch?
I don't know where they were.
If you are, that's an R2 parcel.
I don't know where those townhomes are.
You said 10 townhouses, right?
In the C1, C2, C3. Those were in Mountain Village and Village View developments. But in the RD district, building cover and residential is 35%. So in the RD district, the situation is that you currently have 42 parcels that are over 80%. Some of them may be residential, and no additional parcels would be impacted if it were reduced to 70%. So, that may leave room for reducing it further, the impervious coverage. Unless, of course, you're concerned with current developments.
Well, those are our resorts, so they need a lot of parking. So,
and I think that was the rationale behind the higher impervious in that district. Even though it is a recreational district, there are hotels and resorts that would require more parking.
So one of the major ones is obviously Camelback up on the mountain. Do you know where the data was coming from that you were pulling for impervious coverage? Because it seems like some of them might be catching like condominiums that are getting like 90 or 100% coverage because they're considered a full parcel.
It's land cover data.
Okay.
And so it would be any impervious, whether it's structures, parking or any impervious.
Yeah, I think it might be
impervious.
Some of the Mountain View or the Mountain Village. They're like 4 condos, and those are individual parcels. So it may be counting that whole parcel as 100%, which is kind of misleading data. I don't know exactly. I don't want to.
Parcel though, so for each individual parcel, it calculated the impervious on each individual parcel. So if you have, like, say 4 townhomes together, 4 attached townhomes, that it's going to count each one of those townhome parcels as probably 100% impervious because it's all building.
I think that's what is happening here.
John or Amy, what do you guys have?
Yes.
So all of these are
On
individual parcels.
this specific
Yeah, that's
impervious
that'd be
coverage?
100%.
Yeah, so that might be more.
Just from your experience and doing all the land development,
Impervious, but it's-
everything, like, do you guys have
That might be.
care either way?
So.
Yeah.
I guess my opinion is the RD currently exists at 80% is probably high. I think the commercial at 65 might be a little bit low. The Wawa that went in at Tannersville Insight, that is at 66%. So they probably could have snuck in at 65. They probably could have done something, but the Wendy's, the Friendlies, everything along Tannersville there, I think a lot of them are pushing over 65%. So I agree with Charles. I think the RD, there's room to drop that down, but I might rethink the commercial to 70 or 75% if it were me.
so you would think 60 on RD or 70 on RD? Or
I'd like to see 60 on RD. I'd like to see lower, but I think I could do 60. I think I can talk everybody into 60.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Seems to me, you do it 50%, do it a little lower, you see that there are two RDs. And they got CG, which is Conservation District. You got the one down, I don't know, but the one down in the bottom there has a Conservation District, which is above 4-5 warehouse and all that. And then you have on the other side of that, you have another Conservation District. So, and then you have the Cranberry Bog, which is also Conservation District, and then you got the RD above that. So you look at where those two are going to drain into, and the only other two is the one above the solar farm and the one right there along, well, basically along 611. And even that one potentially could drain into up top of the township. So if you lower it to 65 or 60, I think you'd be better off, because then you don't have to worry about the conservation districts as much. You know, the Cranberry Bog and wherever it's going to drain to. And then if you up the commercial, you know, say 70 or 75, or you know, up it from the proposal was, you know, I think that protects your conservation district downstream from, you know, too much development.
C2 is where we have like retail storefronts and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I think maybe we want to think of like, you know, having C1 be lower because we want the businesses more spaced out, C2 be denser, and then C3 maybe, again, since we have all those wetlands in there, maybe do that one with a lower, maybe keep that one at 65, just because we don't want, you know, too much pavement impacting the impacting all the stream sources there. But if we did like maybe if we did like 70% along 611, maybe what did you say, John? 70, 75?
Yeah.
Like 70, 75 for C2 along like the main commercial corridor, that would help to consolidate that stuff there. Maybe prevent some of that sprawl we're seeing. Well, yeah, but that's where we want the businesses spaced further out, you know, but between the denser corridors like the Tannersville, the Bartonsville, but then when you get out towards Swiftwater where stuff is already spaced apart, it would kind of stay that way a little bit at least.
Now, that does bring up a zoning map question, and that was, at some point, we had talked about, let me zoom in. That some of these larger C1 parcels would possibly go to C2. Because the C1 is trying to encourage smaller buildings, but then you have these big parcels. I mean, this is Great Wolf here. So that's something to keep in mind too, is that if you do want to redraw this so that the C2 encompasses some of these larger parcels up here, like Great Wolf, then
Great Wolf is RD though, right? Isn't Great Wolf RD right now?
No, it's C1.
Oh, okay.
Or it's currently in your commercial district.
Oh.
Your C district. But okay, so C1 district, 60% impervious. C2, possibly 70% impervious. C3, 65% impervious. I mean, it is a little odd to have C2 and C3. I feel like it's a little odd to have the C3 impervious lower, but
I personally think it could be 70, 75 on all three, like John suggested, only because that's his suggestion. And that's his forecast.
It's got to be one or the other, 75.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just worried about those
Yeah.
the stream sources there in the C3 area. I'm just worried if we go too crazy there with the impervious surface, we're going to end up getting them contaminated. I think just because of the unique geography of our town and where our commercial corridor is kind of cropped up there with the warehouse and the old Dominion terminal. Maybe better to, leave it as it is, but not let it get too crazily paved over,
It's 80 right now, so I mean, it could even if it
70 is
reduced
a
to
compromise,
70.
right?
Yeah, even if it reduced to 70, you're still limiting, you're still reducing it by 10%, which is a pretty good reduction. So 60% for C1 or 60? 70 across the board?
Yeah, and then 60 on RD.
That's what John
And
was saying.
60 on RD.
Yep.
Okay.
Can you pull up the table again for a second? The different, yeah.
Can you see that? I
Yes.
can zoom in a bit.
I just think C1 should be lower. That to me makes sense. I mean, I'm not gonna make a big deal about it, but it makes sense to me for C1 to be lower when, those are the parcels, Cherry Lane Church that we're talking about. Those are the parcels furthest away from 611. I'm fine with C2 and C3 being the same, fine with 70, but I feel like C1 should be lower, 65 or 60. I don't know. It's just my thought process.
I definitely agree as far as the ones up the way, but I mean, besides that little chunk of the red of C2, almost your entire corridor of 611 through our township is C1.
Yeah.
You're going to restrict all of those parcels.
Well, I wanted to kind of bring that up tonight as well, because I'm not sure. I don't want to make a big deal about it, but the woman who came to the last meeting, whose property is right by the industrial zone, for God's sake. I mean, I don't understand why that is C1 personally. And, I understand why some of the other C1 parcels next to the R2 zones and R1 are C1. But yeah, I think, to me, it makes sense that along 611, you have C2. And then, and then 715 and everything is C1. So, but I'm not gonna, we don't have to talk about every parcel, but I mean, especially the one near, at the very top of 611, that C1 right there. That to me makes sense to be C2, but I know there's residential on the other side. I don't know what Charles thinks.
No, I like the idea of having dispersion between C1 and C2. So as you're driving through, it's 1 minute you're in a town, then you're in the country again, then you're back in, maybe a little more, tighter knit development. We're already seeing that over there by Sanofi, with the hotel that's going in, there's already the Swift water there. There's already, that already is starting to feel a lot busier. C2 would put a cap on how busy it'll get. But it would kind of, it would allow us to have C1 be, again, what you're still seeing down in Scott Run and stuff like that. A little further south than Swiftwater.
I understand what you're saying, Natasha, though, in terms of, I understand that there's a lot of C1 on 611.
Stripping our 611 corridor with this rezoning map severely. And nobody wants taxes to be raised, but smart development in the future. And in my opinion, and I'll probably crucify for this, but I would rather see the 611 corridor built up in a commercial corridor than up and down 715, Cherry Church Road. And I'd rather condense it along 611, and when you turn off onto those side roads, you have the beautiful Pocono scenery.
Right.
That's my personal.
Well, yeah, that's why I don't understand why the Cherry Lane Church parcels are zoned the same as, this commercial parcel right next to Sanofi on 611. To me, and that's just one. I mean, the rest of it, I think it gets a little more nuanced, but yeah, as we're discussing impervious coverage, it's a big part of the conversation, because obviously this hasn't been proved yet. I like the creation of the 3 zones. I'm not saying we, don't pursue that. I'm just,
Is there anything that you could go to
get for the more rural areas of town?
Well, you gotta understand that C3 is the most offensive.
Right.
Okay, so if you were to have a C4 with that nuclear site.
Frank, that
A data center. A data center.
Frank, I would just make the point that that's kind of what RD is.
Of those sites, the new ones, like the ones on 715, C2 would be all the corridor 611. C3 would be whatever the C2 is, and then the C3 would be the C4. And that's that.
Your
Represent
your
one
C
step.
one's gonna be your doctor's offices, your C twos are gonna be your shopping centers, your C3s are gonna be a Core 5 warehouse.
I'm just afraid of seeing all of 611 turn into like Stroud Township, where you drive through there and it's just like asphalt, you know, on either side as far as the eye can see. You know, I want to be able to drive into Pocono Township and like maybe there is an area like that, but it should be constrained. And then as you keep going, it should, you know, open back up along 611, you know.
What I'm saying is.
Just.
Form that you just add one more level and you make it a lower level, C1, change C1 to.
You bump everything. I get what you're saying.
This way you can have your cake and eat it too, by keeping some of the ones say up on Cherry Lane Church Road. Less.
Yeah.
Than the C1 currently along 611. This way you're not making them non-conforming on 611. They can still have the run of the mill there, but they'll be called C2 instead of C1. And the lowest commercial would be C1 then, would be up on, I know it's a little confusing, but then the C1 would be up on 715 and things like that.
Frank, I would.
C4 would be 4, 5, and all those.
You'd have to reshuffle all of the uses into
You've been doing this for almost 3 years.
I know.
Yeah.
Right. I only put that out there because, there's concerns that you have stuff along 715 and some other more rural roads that you don't want to have the same limits on.
I mean,
Like I would just note that that's kind of what RD accomplishes, because that's where we put stuff like campgrounds and things like that they are like out, it's commercial uses out in the more rural parts of the town. So that's kind of how RD is being used right now, is kind of like the sub C1. And that's kind of the idea of it. I know we do a lot of like, I think amusement parks there, which, maybe we want to look at, but generally it's the less crazy stuff. I mean, well, I guess that's not true. I think Camelback might be one, but
I mean, look, as
We got distracted from impervious coverage again.
as it stands now, C1 is,
Yes, sorry.
yeah, right, it does impact. As it stands now, C1 is intended to be the smaller scale commercial uses. I personally am not in favor of adding another district.
I think you should add another district, but I mean, I think the C1, you're restricting the entire 611 corridor, so you're pushing the apartment buildings, the grocery.
I mean,
stores, you're
it's-
pushing all those things off the 611 corridor into these smaller parcels that we don't necessarily want. Charles said about building a grocery store in that C1 parcel, or it was C3, I think it was. If we don't allow those kind of things down the 611 corridor because we're so restricted on a C1, we are pushing a grocery store to that area off
I
the staff.
think that they are
Well-
permitted. We'd have to look at the uses. We'd have to look at what's permitted in C1. I don't think C1 is extremely restrictive in terms of the types of uses that can go in. The restriction would come from the impervious. So
Which you're restricting heavily.
if you think that 60 is too small, John suggested 70 or 75. There are some commissioners that would like it to be more like 65 for the C1.
I think it should be lower.
We
for
could,
C1.
again, as I said, expand. We could look at if there are areas of the C1 district that would be
C2.
better off as C2, then maybe that's something to look at.
Yeah.
Well, does anyone on the planning commission want to, explain why the parcel that I mentioned is C1 and not C2, the parcel right next to the industrial zone? I mean, I'm just curious why that became C1.
you know, parcels here, you have to look at the writing and see what is allowed in those different.
Yeah, there's a matrix that we all developed.
No, I understand. I'm just, why is that restricted? Like, why do we want to restrict that parcel? It's right next to Sanofi. But why is that C1? I just don't understand that. Like, I understand there's different, C1 is more restricted than C2. So why isn't that C2? I'm just trying to understand the thought process there.
It was based on commercial.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, and what we did is we took into consideration what's there now. And what's there now is restaurants, doctor's offices, Dunkin' Donuts, Pete's, and we went with what's there, and that's fine. It's a vile kind of commercial, and that's yeah, based on the matrix. Yeah.
I agree with Mr. Long's argument. It seems utterly illogical. But if I own that property, could I come here?
He did.
A presentation to you and say, I'd like, you know, to build this structure. Could you then say, okay, this was irrational? We can approve this as C, whatever, C2. Can you do that? Stop zoning.
Yeah.
That's all. It's stop zoning. Or not really. That's spot zoning, so it's in the farm. I do see the lot.
So that kind of C1 district above the industrial, it's again basic uses that were there. There's the like the Candle Haunted House building, Becker's roofing or siding, I forget what it is. There's the gas station on the corner by Sanofi, and then there's single family dwellings on the right side of 611 as you're going up towards Mount Pocono.
There's apartments though, right across from the gas station.
Yeah.
Yes, so there's the Swiftwater Apartments, Spirit of Swiftwater, and then above that you have the old Kimchi and Wasabi. So yeah, Casino Motel, the car wash. So they are. It's kind of a mixed bag. It could go either way, C1 or C2, based on kind of the commissioner's preference.
My concern, I don't wanna see that stuff driven up off 611. And, you know, you just mentioned the Spirit Swiftwater Apartments. They took down the Swifty to put those apartments up, but I have used that example in when we were talking about the lease recovery fund or whatever that was. And the Swifty was paying $12,000 a year in taxes, and then once he built that bottom part, he paid $127,000. So that jump is huge. And not only for our tax base, but I also don't want to push those types of apartments up 715, up Sheridan Church Road, into areas that are C2, C3, where they have bigger impervious coverage. It allows them to build more, but we're pushing them off the 611 border. I personally, again, would like to see those things along 611 and 611 only.
So what are you saying? Change the C1 along 611
I
to
just like the
C2?
amount of C1 that we have. I feel it's very, very, very restrictive. Now, I think if there's little housing pockets within there, they should either stay C1 or go to an R2, depending on what's there. But we're also handicapping our property values because although it might be a rundown, you know, dentist office or something right now, if it's an acre and a half commercial on a 611 corridor, somebody's going to buy that and they're going to make it bigger and better.
I would just note that there are very few things currently in the ordinance that are only allowed in C2 and not in C1. Multifamily homes are allowed in C1 and C2 under the draft ordinance. I'm taking a look at it right now.
Yeah, I'm looking
only
at
like a
this.
handful of things, like I think boarding houses or something aren't allowed in C1.
I'm looking at the table of uses now.
Homeless shelters.
Screen. I know it's hard to see, but in terms of the
Although it
types
might
of
be allowed-
uses,
Although
yeah.
it might be allowed, we're restricting the
Impervious.
coverage, the building coverage, which is going from none to 40% in the C1. So you're heavily restricting your C1 on anything that you build.
Well, yeah, so
So
that's
I
why
think
we're
that's-
consolidating it.
Might be allowed, but you're severely restricting the land that it can be built on.
Right.
Yeah, you're
But I do want-
consolidating it to a smaller area so that it doesn't sprawl and impact, people who live here.
I just want to hear what Nancy was about to say there.
Yeah, so that's so that in terms of the uses, there is not a great deal of restriction in the C1 in terms of the types of uses compared to C2. But the difference is the impervious and the building coverage. So someone could build almost the same exact things that they could build in the C2 district, with the exception of some, hospitals are not allowed in the C1 and other types of more, like not, so any type of like kind of regular neighborhood kind of commercial use could be built in C1 and C2. In the C1, it would just be smaller because there is a 40% building limit and a 60% proposed impervious cover. Or we move that impervious cover up to 70%. And still you would have a smaller building footprint. So the 40% building, maximum building coverage is what limits the building footprint. And that was the idea, was on these arms that reach up kind of the outer reaches of 611 and 715, that those areas would be smaller in scale in terms of the uses compared to C2 and C3. And again, based on what is largely there existing in those areas.
If we kept the C1 at 60%, I'd be in favor of, looking at other areas along 611 to make C2, designating another area, whether it's up there by Sanofi or elsewhere along 611. But I think it's important that, we maintain those areas of open space in Pocono Township when you drive through, so it just doesn't start to feel, again, like Stroud Township, where everything's, hugging you along the road, letting you breathe when you come out to the Poconos, and you're driving between different spots and the resorts and wherever you're going in town.
So are you saying you want 611 to be open? Because
Well,
we
I'm
have a
saying-
lot of back roads that are just that.
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's not where, again, tourists come out here to visit the Poconos. We don't want them driving around on our back roads to experience the Poconos. I'd rather them do that along 611. But again, if we want to designate areas where we want denser commercial development, we're still going to allow commercial development all along. But if we want to say this is going to be a dense area, like, down by the Swiftwater, we want that to be a dense area. So customers people from Sanofi can walk out on their lunch break and go get a coffee across the street or whatever and walk back. That's great. Tannersville, same thing, where you're at the mall, you're at the crossings and you walk over and you get lunch or something outside the mall because the mall food's too expensive. Like, that makes sense. But then again, out in like Scott Run, out in Swiftwater, like lower Swiftwater, where, it's already kind of open, like, kind of try to leave it that way. Don't let that get overly densely developed. Keep it condensed in certain areas with the C2, constrain it as best as you can.
I'm concerned about my tax dollars and saving tax dollars for the future than what the tourists think about 611 Fort Worth.
I mean, we've been hearing this story forever about, all this development's going to bring taxes down, and taxes are, well, they came down this year, but, that $2 million deficit's going to hit us like a rocket in the top of the head at the end of the year this year, if it's not more.
So
But
perhaps what
we're
needs to
we're
be
getting
done-
off topic.
Perhaps what needs to be done here is to look at the C1 district along the 611 corridor and see if there are areas of it that would be carved out and changed to C2. So perhaps up near Sanofi, that area would be carved out and changed to C2. And as we talked about before, around Great Wolf and these larger parcels that are right at the I-80 interchange, maybe some of them would be carved out and put into C2. the reaches along 715, sorry, one sec, along 715, you know, they most likely stay C1. And out along Sullivan Trail, maybe they stay C1. They are smaller parcels.
If you do that, you can keep C1 very restrictive. And, you know, those parcels off of 611 to make sure that they're not crazy, you keep them super restrictive. But relinquishing their restrictions on a couple other properties along the 611 corridor, like Matt said, up by Sanofi, like that makes no sense for it to be a C1. Or anything bigger than 5 acres along the 611 corridor, we're hindering the values of those properties severely. Anyone who bought for that reason is going to come in here with pitchforks. So.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, if you drive down 611 and then you know, you get to the end of this C2 stretch and then all of a sudden, you know, all the development is just, you know, shorter buildings or whatever. It's like, you know, I don't know if that's really like giving them the Poconos, you know, like, you know, you might not want them to go down Cherry Lane or wherever to experience the Poconos, but that is where you're gonna experience them. Yeah. No, 611 is that's our commercial corridor.
Well, yeah, but again, how are people going to get to these businesses too? If you have it all C2, what we're going to have a 6-lane. I mean, I know that's what the developers are planning. They want to, you know, they want to pave over the entirety of 611 on either side and turn it into Stroud Township. But again, how are those people going to get in here? How much traffic is that going to cause? How many years of, you know, re-engineering the roads are residents going to have to deal with? Constraining it to certain areas keeps the traffic there. It's easier for us to manage, and it keeps it, again, from spreading throughout the entire township and becoming just a gridlock like we're seeing now.
I don't get that argument because if you make it all C1, how is it going to constrain develop? I don't understand.
There's less impervious surface. There's fewer parking lots, less large parking lots that people are pulling in and out of. Tannersville gets gridlocked because there's so many parking lots that people are pulling in and out of. We don't want that to be all of 611 all the way up, you know, all the way through. Having those areas where it opens up and there's space between the businesses and there's less intensive businesses. Again,
but how is that going to contain the sprawl? That's what I don't understand.
Well, how is that? Because the sprawl, you're putting most of the businesses in a specific area in C2. You're saying this is where you can do the denser development, and then once you get out of the C2 area, it opens back up, and then you condense back down into a C2 area. And again, you don't have what you see in Stroud Township where it's, you know, retail stores all the way down. You have those like smaller, like, you know, little shops that pop up that are just, you know, small mom and pop operations. A lot of people can't afford to build something huge. You know, people can't afford, you know, 80% ground coverage a lot of times when they're building anyway. So keeping those, you know, artificially depressing the value, like Natasha would say, lets those smaller operations crop up and thrive there because, you know, Walmart's not looking at that property. You get, you know, Nancy and Joe who want to open a shoe shop looking at that property, you know. So there's a certain benefit to artificially depressing the value because it makes sure that, you know, people can open a variety of different businesses instead of just all the same thing all the way down where it's just Big Lots stores and Walmart and whatever throughout the entirety of it. Like, that's not the Poconos, and that's what we're losing when we don't differentiate.
I think the traffic is from the resorts. I mean, we're a tourism town, and I work on 611, and it's gridlock every day I leave my office building. So, and it's not because they're shopping along 611, it's because they're going places, and this is the direct way to get to all the big stuff. Kalahari, they come through here. You know, they go to Mount Airy, they come through here. They get off 80 and they do that. So I don't think you're not going to stop the traffic unless you stop tourism, and then we're going to go bankrupt if you do that. So I'm all for changing some of this up C2 and leave the C1 in the rural areas, the more rural areas, I guess, along 715. But I agree. If it's by Sanofi, it could be C2 because that's industrial and it is built up.
Yeah, I'm in favor of, I think making that C2 makes sense. I like the idea of Sanofi employees being able to walk out. I mean, I'm reading a book right now about, Sanofi in the 80s, and yeah, people used to walk across the street to the Sanofi, or to the Swiftwater Inn to get a drink, it's nice to be able to do that when you're, when you're working in an area, have, accessible businesses nearby that are, close together.
If I have Charles on board with changing that to C2, then I think we might as well just go ahead and do that.
Just again, not all of 611, but I think just that area, I think that makes sense. I think there's good opportunity for commerce there, especially with the ridge and the apartments that are going in there too. There's going to be a lot of, there could be a lot of foot traffic because there's going to be a lot more people in that area too, along with the big business.
Just well, then up towards that area with Santa Fe or Snoppy. There's so many steep slopes. I don't know how you're gonna get a business that would be in that would originally like to be in the C2 area for the coverage in that area to begin with.
That's probably why they left it C1.
Well,
that's why they left it C1.
I mean, if there's an issue with steep slopes, then, then they would need to come and get a waiver, and we could deny. No, we could deny it, is what I'm saying. If there's a steep slope issue and they would need a waiver to get around that, then the board could deny their plan based on that. Yeah, I mean, the reason I really brought it up is because the woman came to the last meeting. She bought that property as an investment property to develop, and now she's like, "Well, what are you doing? What can't I do there now?" And yeah, and the location, it didn't make sense to me. So,
but are we giving her anything more, changing it from C1 to C2, or is it all the same stuff can go in there? What extra are we giving her by changing it to C2?
Coverage and the building and the
Okay.
building coverage.
Okay.
Because it's so dramatically different.
So let's go back to
impervious. Are we going 70? 70 across the board? 70
except RD, we're doing 60.
and RD is 60. Are we doing 70, 70, 70, and 60 for RD?
I'm gonna side with Charles on this. If we can have the conversation that we can discuss this, the C2 corridor on 611. I'm for restricting a C1 lower on the impervious coverage from the 70 to 60 to make it more restrictive.
Yeah. I'm in favor of, designating additional areas along 611, but I think it's important that we keep some of those C1 areas. So places like the cheesecake, Pocono Cheesecake Factory and stuff like that, they don't, get bought out by a big box store or something like that. Leaving some of those C1 areas, those C1 corridors where like little stuff like that can still thrive. I think that's important, but I'm fine with designating additional C2 areas along here, like down by Sanofi, and if there are other areas that people wanted to, would be in favor of. There were specific, a small area along there. Maybe, down at the bottom of Great Wolf, I consider that too. So people could walk down from Great Wolf and shop too with the businesses that are cropping up around there. I know like Eats and Sweets is down there, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Progress.
This to be discussed later.
Okay, so what I will do, I can take a crack at it. What I'm thinking is revise the map so that basically and I'll look at what is here now, but basically kind of coming across from where Sanofi is and then going up and making all of this C2.
What do we think about like up to the brewery there, the Pocono Brewery or the Swiftwater? That's probably from there down 611 C2 past Sanofi.
Yeah, I would love to know what we're actually looking at.
Yeah.
Paul, do you have a map, or do we have a map from the PC? You guys said that you went through each parcel and saw and you indicated what it was. Do you have that map? What's along the 611 corridor?
I think we looked at aerial photos and
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's,
So that would be helpful too.
yeah, it's Dasaki, and then it's the brewery, and then it's Luscious, what used to be Luscious Leather is now an office. And then there's some houses on Old Wiscasset, right?
No,
And across from that is the cell tower.
with the big garage.
So do you all want to, I mean, it may be more efficient if somehow you all maybe would pull or somehow draw lines as to where C2 would be and then get that to me and I'll translate it into this map?
I can
Would that
go
work?
through and kind of make like major landmarks to kind of give you guys an idea on the zoning map to kind of give you an idea of where some of these should be kind of located. Direction would be kind of nice. So like Charles said, down Pocono Brewing Company up north towards Sanofi up to the borderline. Is everyone?
Remember, there's a bunch of plans that have already been approved
Mhm.
throughout the township. They just haven't started construction yet.
Yep.
So those need to be thought of also. The running lane has been in the works for quite some time.
Is that
You
the
have,
Warner Road?
I beg your pardon?
Is that the one on Warner Road?
No, the one on Warren Road is Stanford Point.
Running Lane is the hotel that would go behind Pocono Brewing Company.
Company, the old police barracks.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be a hotel, I believe, or apartment. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's been so long. Hotel. So there's a lot of things that are already slated up along through there. So we're gonna have to take that all into consideration.
Yes.
Yeah.
With no restrictions, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So,
Can you go to the top of this?
sorry to put more work on you guys, but if Paul kind of does a mock-up of the 611 corridor, some of the big landmarks, specifically big parcels as well, could you just jot onto that map too? Anything that has approved land development?
Yep. So Fraser kind of gives me an idea of land development plans that are either in process, approved, kind of throughout the process. So.
And I think tentatively, we're agreeing that C1 is what, 60 or 60, whatever the number is, and the rest were 70, is that? 60 for C1, 60 for RD, and 70 for the other C2 and 3. I think we were all. Yeah. Just so Nancy knows where we're at.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
So Jim.
John, do you agree with that? Sorry, I got your opinion before, but
Okay. While we're on the zoning map, one last little thing that I noticed. So when we made the changes to the parcels that had previously been rezoned to C, and then we allotted them into C1 or C2. What we're left with here is a little parcel standing on its own as R2 right here. What is that?
Spot zoning challenge waiting to happen.
Oops.
That's a
So I don't know.
a small road off 611. There's some single family. There's like a stop sign right there by the crossings.
Rabbit Lane.
Yeah, it's all single family dwellings up there. I think that parcel in itself may be undeveloped. I can actually.
I think it was R2 and then was it rezoned to C?
no, is it still R2 based on that map?
I mean, I think maybe this whole area was R2 and then this was rezoned to C. Let me see if I can get the current zoning map.
I think that, weren't they the parcels that were changed to C?
Was that one of the?
You know, up Shine Hill Road and 715, and then I think, I
No,
thought that,
that's the very beginning of Lower Scott Run.
oh, okay.
So
Okay,
you go
so-
right past the crossing, so you can go on that little cut through.
Here's your current, here's the current zoning map up here, so. Okay, it's this little one right here. Okay.
That's all R two.
Yeah, so that was the.
Okay, so
So that-
it's on that screen. Can't really see the lines, but it's right here on your current zoning map. This was rezoned to commercial, and so it kind of
Yeah, it was.
split that one off.
It's currently a single family dwelling on that lot.
R1,
Right.
yeah,
Yes, I agree with that.
okay.
Yes. Yep.
It's R1. Okey doke. Okay, and then last couple of things. Let me just make sure that's okay. Okay. So I think that does it for the impervious and for the zoning map. The last two things should be pretty quick. The should be principal solar energy facility overlay. So I revised this map according to our previous discussions. And so now, well, I just drew that box on there. Okay. So now the principal solar energy facility overlay district is showing the overlay or the black stripes on the current solar property, and then also in the industrial district, which is here and up in the corner. And then principal wind energy facility, I have a question for you here. So went the wrong way, sorry. Principal wind energy facility overlay district is where it was originally proposed, which is on the solar parcel and then this adjoining parcel. And then the question is, now these are both, I believe, Pocono Manor. Do you want to, so that it's not all on one single owner, do you want to also put the wind energy facility overlay district and on the industrial district, and the other viable property would probably be Camelback?
The lake is already bigger than the solar, right?
Yeah. My concern was that the wind energy facility is on.
It's all a single owner, right? It could be a spot zoning challenge.
I was wondering that.
Yeah, I think that's all Pocono Manor investors. They own, I think, all of those properties or all of that property.
Okay. So does it make sense to permit it on the industrial district as well?
That's what we did with, why don't we have it mirror the solar? I mean, I don't think it's any more likely they're building windmills at Sanofi than solar panels in the near future.
Take our liability down then.
By increasing the number of parcels that they're putting it on.
And affected property owners too.
But. Well, it would have to be a new property owner if we're putting something else on it, right?
Well, no, because it could be a spot zoning challenge if it only affects a single property owner. The whole zone is all Pocono Manor investors. That means it's, to the benefit of a single person, the zoning change. But if we include multiple owners, then that mitigates that concern. It shows that we're not doing it to benefit a single person, which, I mean, we're not. We're trying to, constrain this as best we can.
We're not putting this in Pocono Manor though, right?
I think that's what the blue area is, the solar, or that's the wind, right?
This is, so, let me see if I can see.
Is that
This
solar or the
parcel
wind we're
here?
looking
A
at?
solar field, but not Pocono Manor in its entirety.
That's the,
No,
that's the exist.
so this parcel here, there's a parcel line that's going across here. It's hard to see on that screen. This is the solar field.
I
Right
can't see where
here.
you're pointing.
All of this in here. There's a parcel line that's very difficult to see. It's coming across and down and over.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Like that. That is the solar field. So it's overlaying the solar field and then this adjoining property over here.
And what is that property?
That is, I think, just a vacant hillside.
It's all Pocono Manor investors. Yeah, it's just the hill.
If that's a
It's-
separate lot, why does it need to go there?
It's not a separate lot.
Okay.
No, there's like one lot that wraps around. It's got like a hand reaching out and it wraps around the solar field, and then there's the one that is the solar field, which is that lower center one. You can kind of see the vague outline there.
So they're two separate parcels, but they're owned by the same individual.
And so I think adding in industrial would give us more area, and it would also include other owners. That which would mean that it would help to protect us from a spot zoning challenge.
Flip side, just talk about that. You're giving that industrial parcel now wind and solar, you're encouraging a data center. Not you, I'm saying in general, because I mean, that would be perfect. One of their biggest constraints is electric, and if we give them wind and solar there.
Ooh, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, you can't get enough electricity out of broken.
I don't think so.
You're not gonna get enough electricity to make a difference out of solar and broken windmills.
Yeah,
It's just.
the windmills are not.
But
No, because they're smart enough to know that you're not gonna get it.
I mean, if they're looking to save money, any little bit helps. It is an incentive because it is a huge energy cost, even if they're not paying the entire amount. It's helping to bring their bill down.
Buildings, they just put solar panels along the entire impervious surface that's there now.
Yeah,
The windmills are going to be.
Yeah, but to,
solar.
You're also in a gully there.
but also to your point, we're putting everything at Sanofi. You can't possibly do everything at Sanofi, so it's already impossible, right? I don't. Yeah.
I would also note that Sanofi is, they have to be some pretty tall windmills. Aren't they? They're like kind of set down in a valley there with, the hills are all the way around. So I don't know. Sorry. Oh, the property behind Sanofi that's also industrial. That's got a.
Smaller section below is solar field, and you're proposing that the windmills, whatever could go into that new section. That's all woods.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, yeah, that hasn't been cleared. I don't think for the no.
No, not there.
If they tried to propose one.
Yeah. Can it be limited to the solar field area?
I think that,
No, I mean, that particular property could be limited to the solar field.
I remember someone saying that it would be very difficult to build windmills there for whatever reason. The steepness of the slopes, or I don't remember what it was exactly. I think we're allowing it there, but it would be
So anything north.
very difficult.
I thought we discussed the flour mill and the solar farm, not Sanofi. Did we say that?
For solar? That was for solar.
Windmills there, because you'd only
Oh.
get wind from one side. You can't
Yes.
throw that. It'd be awesome.
Right.
You could do it,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be very cost effective.
Maybe it was you who told me that.
It's Kyle Bates.
Oh, was it Kyle? Okay.
We take the other power and somewhere else.
It's that very little corner.
It's like 4 conversations going.
Yeah.
Here. Solar is here and here.
Why did we have solar and wind be different? Why didn't we just make it like solar and wind, like, you know, big energy generation overlay and put them all in the same bucket?
So they put different restrictions.
I think it's,
Are
I
they
think it's
different?
because, you know, wind is doable, more doable here. There's this part of, you know, because like you just said.
I don't think the wind was.
But,
I don't think the wind was in C3. Solar was in C3.
well, that's why you don't.
Yeah,
allow it.
yeah.
I
Because
just,
you're more
And
likely
moved
to
out
actually
to
get it.
C3.
I just worry about that spot, so the chairman saying one owner has all the property. Well,
Where the solar is,
I
because
know,
I
I
think
don't know.
almost double. We've all been at top of big coconut when we see the scars that this already did. Do we want to add to it? Do we want to add to erosion, which already occurred from the solar field? Because that's about to happen. There were already problems with that, correct? Right?
We had a runoff problem, yeah.
I
But
mean, isn't it double? Yeah. Of what this is? I can foresee what carnage this is going to be with all these trees gutted from there.
I think the trees are already gone from there.
No, from the solar field,
For
yes,
solar.
but not from that other section. Yeah, it's like double of what the solar field is. If you go back to the previous slide.
For wind.
Can you show us the map? There.
Solar?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that, and now, look at the tree that follows, the line follows the street at the top.
So the wind would be on this solar property and this area around it.
So, yeah,
Now, the
why
problem
area
is
around it, though?
with the wind, if we put the wind just on this solar parcel, now you're really, you know, it's
Well, that's exactly.
very risky to zone it for just one single parcel. It's even kind of risky, I think, to zone it for two parcels and one single owner because of state laws and so forth.
Kind of.
Those are 10 fair contracts.
You know what it was? We had, zoned industrial down at where the airport 5 is down there.
Yes.
That was, some of that was zoned industrial, that's what.
You're right.
So, you know, it's impossible. It's just same as not having it in there.
Yes, and then we were dealing with
So
Blair.
that
County.
would
Okay.
be reduced
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
Right.
Then we should add there, it's just using one data center going down there because those for the lane and so that it's already up to data for.
Say, take
Right.
this out and put it in the industry.
But they can't. So you could theoretically look at the small side out there and put one lot down there and dug it. You gotta secure it. So don't be that. When
I
down
get
there,
it.
you got three.
I just.
And we don't have much. You don't have big townships.
I mean, I think it's what makes sense legally to, in terms of wind, to protect the township.
Well, that's a good point.
I think you could both this wind and solar in the same, I just worry about hers.
This is a happy parcel.
So make the wind the same as the solar, solar and wind overlay on the same parcels.
It would put it on industrial, but you know, I think it's a safer bet because if we get challenged, it could go anywhere. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's likely we're gonna see windmills in our industrial zone anytime soon.
I think if we allow for it, that's, yeah, solves our problems too.
I mean, at least there aren't trees there that they're gonna be taken down compared to the side of the mountain, you know, the whole side of the mountain.
Their choice, they're gonna build, they're gonna buy higher than the windmills.
Yeah.
So. I mean, it's possibility.
I think keep it the same as the solar and you know, keep that that open space up there, or at least try to.
Let me ask Leo and Lisa. Leo? How do you feel about the wind overlay being the same, on the same parcels as the solar overlay?
Then we could just call it the wind and solar overlay.
Yeah.
So on
Simple
here
like that,
and
yeah.
on the industrial.
And yeah, industrial green
Is that
energy
again?
generation overlay.
I'm okay with it.
So essentially we have 3, 4 parcels-ish that would allow wind and solar. Ish.
Okay.
I personally am fine with these, with the wind and solar drafts as they are, but I understand why, if the rest of the board wants to change it, I understand. I'm fine with it as it is personally, but I just want to find.
Areas I don't want to get challenged on it. We deem that we don't have enough areas and they can kind of build wherever they want.
So they're separate though, right? Because there's different setbacks, right? Because the windmill falls, you need a setback, right?
One for decommissioning, it's the same one, both of them, remove and make the trees again.
Okay, I think that does it for tonight. Let's see. Let me double check the agenda. Make sure we got through everything. We did check. We got that. Okay, next steps and next meeting date. So you all will work on the zoning map and get that to me. I will make the adjustment to the wind map and these impervious cover. So our next June meeting would be June 22nd. This meeting tonight was rescheduled from May. I don't know that we have, unless you can get this, we can get the zoning map squared away by June 22nd. Is that possible?
I will see.
Okay. July 27th then would be the next meeting. And I can work on revisions and then I think at that point then I'd be ready to make revisions and get another draft of the ordinance out to you.
Okay.
Does July 27th work for everybody?
What is it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
July 27th.
July 27th. Wait, 22nd?
The 7th.
Oh, 27th. Isn't that a Saturday? Oh no, I'm looking at June. I'm sorry. I'm like all screwed up. June 27th. Oh yeah, that works for me. Yep.
And while we're here, I just want to thank the planning commission for doing the heavy lifting for the last 2.5, 3 years. Even though we've made changes, you did the heavy lifting and you made it easy for us to look at it. So I want to thank you as we head near to the end.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be the difficult one. July 27th is not great for me. Is there another, or I mean, I could just not be there if you guys want to have it without me. I'm definitely questionable for a meeting on the 27th. Any other day that week? I mean, I don't know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that week.
No, I'll be here on the 27th. Oh, that other days of that week.
Like 22nd.
I'm gone on vacation that week, the week
The
before.
rest of that week, I am not available. I have every night meetings.
Well, just go ahead with the 27th and know that I'm questionable.
We'll set up a Zoom, like, so that in case you want to.
Is it the time or?
I'm playing in a tournament that day and I do not have my tea time yet. So I'm questionable. I don't know if I'll be there or not. If it's an afternoon tea time, then and it's in Philadelphia, then maybe I can call in on my way back. But I'm fine with that if everyone else is.
You know what? And she'll have everything out to us early anyway. You'll be able to review, get your questions and your thoughts into one of your board members, and they'll be able to speak for you in that aspect.
Okay.
What you okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Then July 27th at 5 p.m.
Okay, see you all then. Thanks for a good meeting and enjoy the next month of summer.